Okay, so we are now live with Paul Haras. Okay, how you doing, Paul? Hey, listen, thank you for being here. I know it's 8 p.m. in Sydney, hectic family time, not always easy to get a moment to sit down and chat, so really appreciate you being here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. No, thank you very much, Mark.
Really excited to just dig into, a couple of things you're doing, because you are, so that I know that titles are not everything, that often our roles are, and what we care about and stuff's not always captured by just a job title, but it's a good starting point. I mean, you're leader of innovation, pedagogy and practice at St Andrews College in Sydney. Could you just tell us a wee bit about your setting and your role there, and just how that fits together?
Yeah, absolutely. No, thanks, Mark. Yeah, not really a straightforward title, really, not really a straightforward role description. It's really born out of the drive by the new principal to bring an older school much as rapidly as possible into the 21st century and beyond. The setting had sort of stalled, I suppose, in a sense, and there was a real desire by the new principal and supported by the system as well, because the school operates within a Catholic diocese system of schools, to help bring the staff and the students, the community, really forward as quickly as possible, to really refocus on high quality educational learning gains and high quality learning achievement by all the students, 7 through to 12. And this role is really to work alongside the staff and the heads of department initially, to help them bring about all of the positive changes that they want to bring into their practice, and to assist them in leading their teams of staff as they improve and modernise their practice.
Not easy, is it? I mean, it's like you say, it's not straightforward at all, because you're coming in as, leader of innovation, pedagogy and practice is enormous. It's absolutely enormous, because it's a cultural shift in the way of doing things.
And that's, you've summed it up, Mark, and it's really a reculturing. That is exactly it. It is a reculturing, a reimagining of what best practice is, of what best practice can look like, and to help a lot of the staff move into a direction that they hadn't seen before. So being alongside them, being present, being and assisting them in recognising change that's required, and then obviously, and being part of that process of renewal. It's really exciting, and it's quite open-ended, but hopefully it generates some great results.
Well, interesting. I mean, open-ended is the thing, and it's as it should be, I think. But I think innovation is something that is just vastly misunderstood by a lot of organizations. And they create a role and a title, and then think that that's it. Innovation is going to happen. We've got this innovation person, and they think. I think just from lots of conversations, it's about introducing new ideas, rather than new twists on the familiar, or as we're talking about, a cultural shift or a reculturing. And don't actually think about, for example, how to create the structures that support innovation, and the space that supports innovation, and the discussions. So I'm wondering, I noticed on LinkedIn you post a lot about leadership, which I think is an essential part of leading innovation. I mean, you have to think about how you engage people and how you bring them with you. How far back do you go then? I mean, are you talking about, with your sort of, with the body of teachers and professionals you're working with, are you kind of going back as far as the why of education? Why is it? What is our purpose here? What are we doing here? What are our beliefs about education? Is that the kind of discussions you're having, or where's your kind of starting point with this?
Oh, now I'm really glad that you mentioned the why, because that's really what's at the heart of my desire to do what I do, is to get people to understand the why of what we're doing it. I'd say that we're part way along that level of understanding with some of the key players and with some of the key heads as to understanding the why. There's that element is definitely part of my desire to bring into it. Being the first year, we're still in the first year of my role. That part hasn't developed to the level that I'd like it to develop to. We've had a lot of the, I suppose, the nuts and bolts changes occur at the same time. And so that deeper philosophical reasoning behind why of these other administrative type of changes occurred have sort of overwhelmed the bigger picture, that underlying reason of why. So we haven't been able to get to that yet. We're probably working on this is how we are going to do some things, which in some sense was necessary just because of a timing issue. But really, as quickly as possible, I was hoping to develop the why much more so. But we've been doing the how first, just out of necessity. There's been a couple of systems changes that have occurred where a lot of in-servicing as to how to use systems, how to use these other technologies that have been introduced have sort of been the number one, which is not my preference. My preference is to move away from the let's learn how to do and use these instruments to why are we using these? Why is it important that we're going to be doing what we're doing? That's a really critical question that you asked, and one that, it needs to become the priority, is to concentrate on the why.
It seems like you've got the almost a good starting point. I was really fascinated, actually. I don't think I've ever read this before, but on the website for your institution, it says that it's kind of based on or inspired by the principles of the Scottish Enlightenment, which I read that and I sat with that for a wee while because I studied at Edinburgh University, which is that's the home of it's Adam Smith and Lord Kames and Turnbull and all these people, and so when I studied there, it was we're in the shadows of these giants of the Scottish Enlightenment. But when I read this on your website, I thought, well, this period gets a lot of attention for kind of commerce and trade and economy and philosophy, but its contribution to education is interesting as well. And if I understand it, and I'm not sure if I'm correct here, but so the Scottish Enlightenment to me is about, it's about improvement and betterment and virtue and practical application to society. And so I think about the practical application in that time was, that's the kind of forerunner to the Industrial Revolution. And the practical application was, equipping people with knowledge to fulfill pretty predetermined roles in society. And there was a sense of, this is your place in society, and this is what society needs. And you've got that whole model of education that comes from that military foundation into industrial thinking, which is still very hard to move out of and still very much prominent today. So I wonder, as part of the innovation that you're going through, is it rethinking what that practical application is? In a society where we can't actually anticipate, we're moving into this volatile, uncertain future. Is part of the discussion around, well, we don't have to change that. We're still looking at the practical application of education, but now this is different. The application is something unseen, and so we've got to shift our thinking. Is that the frame of the discussion? Are you able to work with that without kind of overhauling the school's mission?
Everything what you've just said will become part of that discussion. We're definitely being cautious not to overwhelm with too much too soon. So I do like the fact that you brought up the VUCA, the VUCA, the volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous present and future world that I'd certainly buy into that worldview, and that the predictability and the certainty that did exist, especially pre-industrial, industrial age of almost predetermination, seems to be a thing of the past. And we're definitely looking for ways of thinking that are much more flexible, that are much more open to change, open to readily adapt to the unexpected. So this idea of pigeonholing and almost production line manufacturing of education, of rolling through the production line system of generating students from year 1 through to the end of year 12. It's definitely an old model that we want to be moving away from. I can give you a practical example of one of the things that's really taken root, is the shift away from a traditional view of assessment, of assessing student achievement. Now, some other schools have definitely taken an early adoption role in this way of thinking about assessment, but it's the idea of continuous formative assessment, especially through the junior years and even into year 11, second last year of school, where an older model would be deliver some content, deliver a program of instruction, and at the end of that, give an exam, and then use that singular exam as the sole mode of gaining, a gauge on how much the students have learned. Now, of course, there hopefully not too many places are still sticking to that model. Again, part of my role was to help this current school move away from that, and we have successfully to a very large extent, and we've moved into a multiple monitoring mode of assessing, where there are numerous tasks, through the formative process that all contribute to the ability of teachers to gather evidence of student progression. Some of the teachers were easier for them to grasp that vision and to accept that as a legitimate form of assessing student achievement, and there were some that were still anchored to that sort of traditional summative, we wait till the end and then there's an exam and your mark is what you're going to get and that's going to go on the report. So conversations and assisting people to see the value in moving into a different way of doing things really can pay dividends, and the hard work really can pay off, and we're at the beginning of that, so and it's looking good.
Well, it's interesting when you talk about formative assessment, because there's so many opportunities in there. Once you get the buy-in that this is obviously, and it's clearly a better way to approach things. I mean, I'm not even going to attempt to balance that point. It's obvious, but once you've got the buy-in there, I mean, I understand what you're saying, that you would have preferred to start with the why, and then build out from there. And you've had to go for the mechanisms first. But I guess there's an opportunity once you've got the buy-in to the formative assessment, that then there's space to start thinking about the skills that you want to develop and making sure that the formative assessment supports that. I mean, to quote a guy from the Scottish Enlightenment, Lord Kane said that facts alone are useless lumber without being able to draw consequences from them. So kind of moving away from that knowledge-rich thing and into the formative assessment mode, I wonder, are you focusing on things like self-reflection from learners to shift away from the instructor-led model, to say, well, here's how we do self-reflection, here's how the metacognitive process works, here's how you think about your learning. Are you involving the learners a lot in this process as well, I take it, to make formative assessment what it can be?
And also, Mark, you've raised another really, really good point about including, and we were just actually not too many weeks ago talking about how to incorporate self-reflection tools as part of the assessment. The mathematics team actually just came up with a really nice investigation style task for years 9 and 10. Ran a very successful formative assessment, open-ended style questions, real-world focus, and inclusive. And part of what's required by the students is a substantial self-reflection tool, which was assessed and graded and used as part of the formative process. So the idea that the assessment of learning is restricted solely to the role of the teacher is also now being opened up to, well, the students themselves need to be involved in the assessment of their learning, not just the recipient of a task and then they submit a task. And no, we want to engage with them at that deeper level, at that metacognitive level, where they are actually thinking about what it is that they are learning and how they are learning, and able to process that during their periods of learning. It's really exciting because to see it not being in place, to see that these elements were not being used, to see them introduced, and then where they have been introduced, to see the success that happens quite quickly, is really heartening. It's nice to have those early wins, and to then use those as motivation, if you like, for others to see that it can work, it does work, and great advocates for it are the students themselves.
Yeah,
where they can actually talk.
Can't put a price on that. I mean, for you trying to lead a cultural change or a reculturing, yeah, I mean, it must be amazing to get those, as you say, those early wins. And in the end, the voice of the learner is going to be the strongest advocate for further change to build on, But do you find that, I mean, this is what you're talking about really essentially is a shift from, I mean, it's the whole Ken Robinson thing, or the guide at the side, the sage on the stage, that shift to learning guides, to not being instructors and teachers. And this is when it gets very difficult, I find, because when you talk about reculturing as an organization, I mean, it's also a part of the individuals, the self-concept of teachers kind of letting go and learning to, how to empower learners to be the protagonists in their own story is a really difficult thing. And I think it's understated sometimes. It's kind of glossed over in books and, we need to move from this to this. But the reality of, especially teachers who've been, long in the game, and they've come through that system where, we talk about things like classroom management, and it's all instructor led, and even the structure of the tables and chairs and things and facing the front. And it's, that all is reflective of that mindset, that it's very difficult to let go of that. And I don't think people are given enough credit for, for making that shift. How do you help that? I mean, how do you encourage, because you alluded to it, but you must meet resistance. It's difficult to let go. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, now that is a great question. Look, patience, and then an excessively abundant amount of patience is required at times. It is difficult to convince people who are convinced that what they were doing and have done and are used to is, and just, the wrong word is to say it's wrong. It's not helpful, and I don't think it's a good professional practice to say, look, that type or that methodology is wrong. It's just that there needs to be an acceptance that new methodologies need to be explored. And this this ties into the idea of teachers being lifelong learners.
Yeah.
What and that's not just about content, but it's about practice, and that's about, you know, what is going to be the best way to lead our students, what's going to be the best way to lead as requirements call for. So teachers who do not feel like it's their professional duty, their professional responsibility to explore new methodologies, are doing themselves a disservice and doing their students a disservice by only looking at one way, which is the way that they have understood in the past. I think it's incumbent upon us as professionals to be open to this type of learning, to reflect upon our own practice, to view other people's practice, to delve into the research, and then to look for ways to incorporate it. Now, some professional educators are more willing to do that, and some are not. But I think the approach is the rising tide. So, you know, you start with the trickle, and that builds into a stream. The stream will develop into a river, and then hopefully, you know, you have a raging torrent by some stage. You know, when I say to be impossibly, you know, patient, to be infinitely patient, I mean, I wish I was. I wish I could say I was infinitely patient. I do experience, you know, the frustration of not seeing things move ahead as quickly as what I would like. But of course, you know, you do have to sometimes just accept that and know that it's going to be part of the mission to be there, and just believe that, you know, you are that dripping water that's falling onto that stone, and eventually that stone will wear, and there'll be a hole will develop. So I think I'm answering in a convoluted way. I try to be as patient as possible, the patience of a saint, but really with an equal measure of determination.
Yeah, I think that's a practical approach. I mean, the frustration from my own part in these similar situations is because you're aware that there are learners passing through this system of learning all the time, and the world is changing quickly, and that if we don't take advantage of, you know, that what we know, and it's indisputable, we know what works, then all these learners that are passing through are missing that opportunity to benefit from that approach. And of course that's frustrating. And I think that's important for educators to know, that it's not frustration with them, it's frustration with, you know, that the learners are missing these opportunities, you know, because that's what it's all about in the end. It's for them, isn't it? And I've often found it's important to try to get at the root of things, that the self-concept of yourself as a teacher is different from, you know, necessarily your motivation for being a teacher. You know, we need to divorce the professional practice from it to make this objective, different from me as a person and the reason and motivation that I get into teaching, and my, you know, dedication to my profession and my love and compassion for my learners. That is intact. That is beyond question. But the professional practice, when we separate that and just look at it as an objective thing to be kicked around and depersonalized and improved and all of that, once you get to that stage, I find that, you know, for me, I mean, I've been a teacher for many years, and an educator, you know, teaching in high school, teaching in language schools, teaching in universities, teacher trainer, all that kind of stuff, come through all these different evolutions. And for me personally, when you surrender to the fact that you will never be at the end of that journey, it is invigorating, and it reinvigorates your professional practice. But I think you have to experience that to really understand that. It's difficult to say that, you know, because it's a process of unlearning and relearning, and that is, you're fighting the good fight, Paul, basically. I mean, you're right in the thick of it. And I wonder, because you also bring in technology to support this change, and I wonder how that fits, because it's almost, I mean, it's a big load here. I mean, because you're talking about this kind of professional practice and pedagogy, and you're also talking to educators who suffer initiative fatigue as it is, about, hey, artificial intelligence, machine learning, I mean, how does that come in? I mean, how do you bring that in as a way that supports learning and not just, oh, here's another new thing that we've got to do?
Oh, look, again, the initiative fatigue, change fatigue is definitely a real issue to be aware of. It's interesting that you bring in the technology. One of the areas that we have been working on actively is to bring in those digitally powered platforms that are going to assist the teacher in achieving their better outcomes. So self-marking tools that are prevalent now. Mathematics have quite a few platforms that allow it, even through the humanities subjects. Program called Common Lit comes to mind, and others that are escaping me now. I heard a couple mentioned yesterday by our head of literacy. Are fabulous tools that have existed for a few years now, but weren't around back when we were lads and our teachers didn't have access to this type of thing. So the fact that the technologies now have been created and are readily available and work exceedingly well in actually providing quality feedback means that the teacher themselves doesn't have to be consciously thinking, oh my goodness, if I am going to be assessing multiple tasks by students across every single week of a school term throughout the entire week, how much extra workload is that going to cause? And of course, we don't want to do that to our teachers who need to have an achievable workload. So by taking advantage of the technologies that exist to assist them to do a better job, by taking some of the time intense load off them, really is an eye-opener for so many, that they can go, oh wow, so I can set some work, some learning task, and an AI powered machine will assist me in actually generating quality feedback for the students. Yes, is the answer. And they just like, oh, this is incredible. And they're saying we're allowed to use this. Yes, and not only allowed, you're encouraged to use it, because the more elements that we can bring in from the breadth of the educational world and expose our students to it through quality teaching is going to benefit everybody. And then suddenly the time pressure is minimized, and teachers can get back to doing what really their time is most valuable, which is the interaction with the students and interrogating the information that has been generated through these different technologies. Now, there's still a place where the teachers will still need to do the old-fashioned marking, where they're going to have to do either marking papers or writing their comments through on a Google submitted form and writing their comments there. And that part of the role of the teacher is not going to disappear. But one of the this links into what I was talking about with the continuous formative. One of the arguments was, oh, you want us to do multiple tasks in a term and provide multiple feedback points in a term. Well, where's this time going to come from? And you say, well,
yeah.
The time is here through the technology.
Yeah.
So, and when that part of it accompanies the new structure that is being introduced, and that the new structure is supported by elements that actually recognize that the pressures on teachers, then the teachers feel like this is not just please do more here, do more. No, it's essentially the work smarter, not harder.
Yeah.
I like to actually, I don't even, I just like to say, look, it helps you do your job more effectively. It creates more effective teaching. It creates more effective learning.
Yes, I think that is the strongest argument possible, and a good one to lead with as well, because that is inevitably the first thing in many educators' minds when you go in and you talk about innovation. It's just, oh, great, more on top of what I'm already doing. And why wouldn't they think that? Because that has been the culture. It's more administration. Governments keep changing, the political winds keep shifting. this initiative, that initiative, we're getting rid of this system, this qualification. Now you've got to learn this. Now it means this. My goodness, what liberties we take with teachers. And I'm always careful in anything that we're doing in innovation and education is to say, no, teachers are, sacrosanct. They are heroes. I mean, what they do on a daily basis is incredible. So leading with the argument that what technology does initially is it frees you up to do essentially what you really want to do. Why would a teacher be spending hours marking, okay, do these learners know the symbols of the periodic tables, of the elements? I mean, that is something you can outsource. I mean, for that type of learning, it's very mechanistic. So let the machine do it, so that you can focus on, right, what can we apply this to? How can we explore this? Or how can I support this learner that might have otherwise got lost because I just don't have the time to focus, on supporting them. And once they realize, because I think that at the heart of things, that is what a teacher wants to be doing. They want to be lighting a fire, and people not filling the empty vessel, and let the machine do that. So once that argument becomes clear, and once they get over the hurdle of the initial learning, I can't help think that this will be liberating for teachers, especially when you talk about AI, and I noticed you were involved with maths, particularly. You were leading a team in mathematics. And so AI is amazing there, isn't it? I mean, it's like focusing in on the areas that you're having issues with and suggesting and recommending, why don't you try these tasks and these things, just so that it's a bit more intelligently done. So when you come back into the, the learning environment, you're more aware of what you need to work on and all of that. I mean, it just makes perfect sense. But are you there yet with this? Do you think that you've made that argument, or where are you on the curve?
That is a $64,000 question. We are over the hump. Look, optimistically, I think we're over the hump in terms of I believe in the conversations that are happening now, a sense of inevitability that the changes that are happening and will continue to happen. And there's that enough groundswell of the staff involved that do see the benefits and are buying in that's going to create that momentum where pockets of resistance will melt away. There's still the work to do. There's still the culture shift is far from complete, but the real big hurdle of having the body of the staff accept that change is coming, change is necessary, and they are part of the change. I believe the hump, we've crested the hill, and I think the rest of it is definitely going to be really drilling in, digging in, getting into the really exciting stuff where the conversations change from, but why do we have to do this, to now that we're doing this, how can we really do it well? And then bring in the why. And then we can start talking about now this, and can you start to see why we're doing this and why will this work and why are we doing what we're doing? And that's, I believe that will be the next phase of the work. And so this year, the first year, definitely was a grind. The COVID didn't help, obviously. Next year, lockdown free. I think the excitement will really kick in, and definitely focus on the why we're doing this. The capacity is there. You can see it. The capacity is definitely there, and the nuts and bolts issues about how to use various systems will be put to bed, and we can focus on the more interesting stuff, which is the getting to know our learners and getting back to being those human beings, which drew us to the profession in the first place.
Well, that's an exciting moment, isn't it? And I'll say right now that I hope that you're going to be documenting this process, because I and many other people that be listening to this and that we can share this with be really interested about the process, because this is the big thing, you know, is you have, I know we're part of the same community, and for example, Learn Life, you know, we're aware of the outliers who are starting, they're planting their flag outside the periphery of the current system and saying, we're going to build something from the ground up. And that is one way to do it. And we need that, because we need to see them flourishing and succeeding with the ideal model. I think, you know, that this is what we can do. But that alone doesn't change things. You know, we need, at the other end, we need to be within the traditional system, doing the graft as you're doing now, you know, innovating from the ground up and meeting people where they are. So ideally, you'd like to start with a why, but that's not going to happen because there's practical realities first. So you're doing it the other way around, and you're now going to go through the experiences and then draw the learning from that and see how you can affect a shift. And that's a fascinating process. So I hope that you're able to, I don't want to give you more homework here, but to document this process, because I'd love to see how it's going. And what I'd like to ask you is, now that you've crested this first hill, hopefully it's the highest one, and you can now see these broad sunlit uplands in the distance there. What does that vision look like? You know, where is it that you would like the school to be? And more generally, as an ecosystem, thinking about the school as part of an ecosystem of learning with community, employers, colleges, universities. How do you think that looks in the future, this evolution? You know, what's the bold vision that maybe you don't want to scare people with right now? But
I hopefully, because bold vision, I think I know what the principal's bold vision is, and we haven't come into the ecosystem, the broader connections. But I'll speak in general terms, where I'll speak about schools in general, because even though each school is individual, each school has its own characteristics, but there's obviously a lot of similarities between schools. And I see the future of schooling, and the current school that I'm working at, being part of the global community of educational institutions. I'd like to see them definitely race headfirst into a technology-rich learning environment, really not hesitating to adopt more and more and more of those highly powerful AI machine learning tools that can assist the teachers. I'd really like to not lose this opportunity that COVID did present to us in terms of how we deliver our instruction. So an idea of a blended approach, a face-to-face approach coupled with a virtual approach to learning is something that needs to be explored further while it's still fresh in everybody's minds, and we don't let it dwindle on the vine, especially for senior years. I think there's a lot of opportunity there where students in the final 2 years of school, where supervision, and this is the big catch of it, the supervising of young people, which is part of the profession, part of the job is, you know, supervising children. Well, if that part of it, if the supervision part is not an essential, is not a necessity for the learner, such as year 11, year 12s, and really their focus is on the learning, then there's a real opportunity now for schools to continue this exactly how we're doing it now, these virtual conferences, these virtual classrooms, these online learning platforms. They can be set up as synchronous or asynchronous learning times, and schools have a real opportunity to explore that and to open up that world in a way which isn't forced upon them through a lockdown, but in a way which recognises the changes in the world that are now possible. And it's incredible to see how much professional development has occurred because of this. I know that my skills with various forms of technology just were exponentially improved because they had to be.
Yeah.
And I think pretty much every educator on the planet went through the same thing. Students also experienced the same thing. Parents and families also experienced it. And so suddenly this incredible disruption has created an enormous opportunity. And I've been doing some informal polling of the students at the school, just asking them, show of hands, who would prefer, this is a question I've actually asked in at least 20 classrooms, 20 sets of students, who actually would prefer to have stayed home, not come back to school and continue doing their online learning. And it changes from classroom to classroom. But on average, out of say 25, 26 students in a room, I'm getting around about 5 or 6 arms raised, those students who would prefer not to physically come to the school.
Yeah.
And that was shocking. I really did not think there would be that percentage. So 1 in 5, 1 in 6 would say, I would rather stay home and do my learning there. Now, whether or not that turns out to be beneficial for them in the long run, well, we don't know. But it's worth looking into. And especially if it suits the family, suits the learner, and in many cases, suit the educator. If I'm reading articles correctly, if I'm looking at, I'm only looking at media reports, but reliable sources, that this country, Australia, looking at a chronic teacher shortage over the next 4 to 5 years. I mean, what are we going to do about it? How are we going to address that problem? A lot of pundits say just throw extra money at teacher salaries. Well, I don't think too many governments are very excited about that proposition. So I'm a big advocate for paying teachers appropriately. But when you go to a government and say pay teachers more, you're not really they don't open the door too quickly for you. So there has to be other elements that come in to the profession that are going to be a positive for the learning, positive for the learner, and positive for the educator. And I think this online is very much on the cards now as a viable option.
Yeah, I completely agree, and it shouldn't be taboo to talk about the obviously hugely disruptive pandemic, but the fact that it has presented opportunities, as every crisis does, and it's not taboo to say that. The difficulty is, of course, demonstrating leadership and vision and engagement and bringing people with you before the weight of routine closes back in. And we see it starting to happen. People want to go back to the comfort of the familiarity before and almost forget what that was like, rather than building on it. And it does present huge opportunities. And I think the poll that you took would probably be reflected to greater or lesser extents in every learning environment everywhere, because homogeneity doesn't exist, does it? I mean, for some people, school is a sanctuary, and other people, it's certainly not. And there's different family situations, there's different things going on in people's lives, and learning is not, it doesn't belong to this fixed, static situation. So you're mentioning synchronous and asynchronous learning, being able to change context and environment. I mean, imagine if we were able to broaden that out and think about learning in the community and learning with employer partnerships and learning, it's vastly more difficult to manage, but if you do it right from the bottom up, it'll take care of itself, because the learners themselves are directing it. They're doing what they want to do. You take that supervision element away, really, because you're not mandating it. You're saying, well, how do you want to learn? It's hugely empowering. So that's a real shift in thinking. And I wonder, I mean, in terms of the vision, just to kind of finish off here, it's opened up, don't you think that this has opened up, as we move away from this knowledge-rich, one-to-many, form of instruction and all that kind of way of thinking that goes with it. In the pandemic, we saw well-being come greater into focus. And I think well-being is the gateway to generally a more holistic approach, isn't it? It's not think, okay, pastoral care and things like that side of teaching, but actually holistically, the emotional well-being, mindfulness, compassion, all of these things that are part of the human experience, but somehow often left, you know, aside. And school is a serious environment, and we talk about learning and, you know, all this kind of stuff. It now seems to be coming into a very much a more holistic approach to supporting learners. And, you know, what you're talking about is creating more space for teachers. And I can't help but think that this is what draws people to education in the first place, is you want people to flourish, you know, you want people to self-actualize, you want to take care of people and help inspire them. And, you know, the way that is sometimes that what actually happens is that we get divorced from that reality, which creates burnout and all this kind of stuff. So I'm wondering, are you noticing shifts in conversations around this wider aspect of learning, about, you know, skills, about who we want our learners to be, not what, about words like mindfulness and compassion and emotional well-being, social emotional well-being? Are you noticing more conversations around you in your learning environment about that wider aspect?
Mark, absolutely. And that idea of a holistic, a personal well-being approach to the role of education and the role of educators is absolutely at the top of the agenda. So that even though learning is the goal, learning is student learning is what we are on a mission to achieve, and improving student learning. And of course, part of that is the ongoing learning of the teachers. It's that shift in the mindset where the well-being of the student is paramount, and it's the well-being of, and the phrase I want to pick up on is the self-actualization. It's something I heard many, many years ago, and it's really stuck with me, is that ability to help every student move from where they are to where they want to be or where they need to be in that process of discovery, that journey along there, that young period in their life, where we get to open up the world to them. And again, in a world gone past, where the school was a mandatory, heavy-handed, there's consequences for failure. And, you know, if you don't do well here and you don't do well on that test, then there's going to be something bad. Of course, that was so detrimental to the idea of higher quality learning. And there's definitely at the school I am now, and coming into conversations, not just at this school, but in every conversation that I'm part of now, it's how do we connect the learner to their learning, and what is our role as an educator to make sure that we see the person and not just the student. And that way, hopefully, that develops an understanding within the learner that what they're doing is actually improving them and getting them ready for the rest of their lives, and not the converse, where if they struggle in the learning process, that they are somehow defeated by it. And the word resilience comes in as well, that the teacher reaction to, and I'll use a generalized example, a poor result. Some student submits work that is, of substandard. It might be minimal effort or minimal understanding. They're only showing, a shallow level of an understanding. Now, what needs to happen at that point is additional time and energy and effort needs to be delivered at that point, so that student does not feel like they have failed. And in a non-caring setting, it would be, but here's your result, bad luck, and we don't do anything about it, and better luck next time, and move on.
And you need to work harder.
Oh yeah, just work harder. Like, that doesn't help any student. So again, the high quality interaction where the teacher is alongside every student, whether they're achieving at a lower level or a higher level, but that high quality interaction where the human to human experience, where the feelings associated with learning are acknowledged and are as equally important as the actual assessed outcome, that becomes a critical part of the culture. That is where really the most significant learning is achieved, not just through the academic pursuit, but through the humanizing process of being a learner. And that's definitely an element which has come into not just my role, but is supported by the principal and by a team of leading teachers. And it's really nice. I'll tell you, and this gives me heart, because I've now been in education for 25 years, I think it is. There's a lot of younger teachers who actually really understand this point and are completely on board with it.
Yeah, I think that has shifted already, and it's what you're talking about there. I don't think you'll find a lot of disagreement about caring about that aspect of education with even teachers who've been in for 20, 30 years. And I don't want to ever assume that the longer you've been in teaching, the more set in your ways is, because it's absolutely not always like that. And it can be the reverse. I mean, it varies, but as a trend, I don't think you'll find a lot of disagreement in the care for the whole person, and especially after the pandemic, which I think has broken through the weight of routine and the burden of administration and the burden of care, and all these things, the weight that the teachers feel, and it's broken back through in many cases to just this simple human interaction of I'm here to help you be who you want to be. And using that as a starting point to round back to where we began. We began thinking about your school website and the principles of Scottish Enlightenment, but I mean, that was an enlightenment that changed the lives of people at a certain part of society, and the movers and shakers, the people on the ground. It revolutionized the way we thought about economy and trade and commerce, but it didn't change the lives of people on the ground who had to make those wheels turn. That to me is not a true enlightenment. What we're talking about here is a true enlightenment. It's from the ground up. It's not writing people's story in advance of them turning the page. It's saying, this is your story, you write it, we're here to support you. And imagining what the world could be if there's people there that are self-actualized and feel comfortable in their own skin and feel able to embrace failure, if you want to use that word, as a learning opportunity, and to celebrate those things, and to not attach stories to themselves about their potential and self-concept because of these absolutely unnatural impositions of standards and these abstract things that are fine if you're making chicken nuggets and car parts.
Yes.
Good, cool, go for it, but not for human beings. That is absolutely anathema to the human spirit. So that to me is a true enlightenment. So I would just like to acknowledge your part in this, and to say thanks for being one of these people that's out there doing your bit, because it's hugely important. And I would love to read more about your journey as well. I hope you share it with us on LinkedIn. I hope you share the highs and lows, and the learning and where the breakthroughs happen, because there's a lot of other people out there trying to do the same thing. So the more we share, the better it's going to go.
I'll definitely start writing down some more. I will start. I haven't been doing it on a regular basis about documenting the process, but Mark, I will definitely. This conversation has absolutely reaffirmed all of those ideas that I have, that I believe are being supported. I know the work at Learn Life is really, really exciting, and I've got a lot of time for expanding those horizons about what school can be, of what school should be, about what a truly human holistic education looks like, without being, bound so arbitrarily to, these imposed standards and compliance officers and all these other, reductionist ideas that come into a manufacturing model of education. I'll definitely be more determined to share this in written form.
Yeah, it would be appreciated, and I know that I'll be keen to share it with others as well, because I know they'll hugely benefit. It's I think we need these sorts of communities of practice just to kind of they give energy. They invigorate, they refresh, because it's hard going sometimes, and sometimes you feel like you're the only voice in the room saying these things, and it's not easy. So these things I think are important to retrench and just get back out there. Because where you're going, I believe that is the right direction wholeheartedly, and there's a number of people, I think a lot of people do, but change is grueling. It really is.
It is.
So I hope you're looking after yourself as well in all of this.
We are. I'm doing well. Like I said, I know that it's a long game. That patience is a virtue. I'll work on becoming more virtuous.
Not in the 17th century Scottish Enlightenment sense, I hope. Hope we've advanced from that. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time, Paul. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I can't wait to see what comes next from all this.
Oh, look, absolutely. Thank you so much. Yes, definitely. We'll try and stay in touch more regularly. I really will start documenting what is going on and why it's going on. I'll share the challenges and share the wins, and definitely start to spread the love.
Great. And I'm sure, at NEO, we're connected to a lot of other people in the same sort of scenarios or similar scenarios. We, tried to connect you, and lots of people that are ready to really share what they're doing as well. So I'll make sure and point them in your direction as well to get in touch, if that's okay.
Oh, absolutely, Mark. It's been an absolute pleasure talking. Hopefully we get to talk again soon.
Yeah, let's do that for sure. Yeah. Okay. Thanks a lot, and enjoy your weekend coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're going away.
So, yeah. Much needed, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay.